You can literally watch this team lose all hope in real time if you watch back game 3.
Seeing Niski go in with that package as the culling starts to be opened, you're just like, what are we doing here, lads? Yeah, but this draft from China X was ballsy as shit. Like, when I come into this, I'm just like, we're going up against humanoid.
Rob. Yes, it was. To the point. That's effective use of the English language. Hey everybody, welcome to Euphoria Podcast, episode 10, here in the spring season. As always, we're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud.
And this time we give you the rundown on all things that happened over our 4-day madness over the weekend. 2 of our teams were knocked out, but we also talk about some of the upcoming matchups as well to give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what to expect.
We also get lost in the sauce at the start of this episode and start talking about Netflix series and anime. So if that's your jam, we're going to kick it off now.
Find out what my problem is.
Welcome, Rob. Normally we have a guest here. Welcome to all the fans. Yeah. You obviously just got the nice condensed intro. Now you're going to get the Rambler intro. Quick note before we start this episode. Normally, we're really good about getting out there and getting those community questions, whether it's in the YouTube community tab, on Discord, or Twitter. This week we didn't do a question because of the kind of chaotic and crazy schedule. Yeah. But I do want to say we really appreciate all the people who comment, who interact, who respond to these tweets and give us more things to engage with the community about. Because as much as we're excited about talking about certain things, it's always good to see what you guys are fired up about, what you are passionate about. So thanks to everyone who comments regularly. We'll have another question this week or next week, but for this week, you're just going to have to roll with what we want to talk about, which is mostly League of Legends and the LEC, unsurprisingly.
And not your obsession with having 2 cups on your desk for no apparent reason.
Rob Price. This is the most honest I've ever been on this podcast. There's a bottle of water here too.
3?
I'm a 3 beverage boy, and I'm not. Look, I need water, I need some form of caffeine, and I need a third variable beverage, which is usually just a glass of water that I left from the day before, but is sometimes like a smoothie or something.
Not a mate or...
No, I'm a sucker for... There's just so many good beverages in the world. There's so many tasty things. The problem is that like I do go through degen periods where I just will drink an entire day's worth of calories unconsciously while just doing other stuff.
I will say it does annoy me when I go to a restaurant and I'm like, say I'm going for brunch or something, and I'll get my coffee and then I'll get like a lemonade or something. And the waitress is like, 2 drinks?
Yes.
And I'm like,
always.
Why?
I'm a 3.
Why can't I just get 2 drinks?
Sometimes I'm going to say I'm a 3-drink boy. You know kombucha, coffee, cocktail.
It's like coffee dries my mouth out. I just want something to sip on afterwards, you know? It's like, I know. Disrespectful.
Just embrace extra beverages.
Be a beverage baddie.
Be a beverage baddie. It's good markups for the restaurants too, in Berlin at least. Although I will say every time I go to America, I ruin my life because for those of you who don't know, bottomless like soda refills are really common.
That's insane to me. Yeah.
And as a kid, I would just drink like 30 glasses of soda before the food gets there because like your parents are just having a conversation or the adults are having, they don't notice that the waiter or waitress just keeps coming over to refill that soda.
Yeah.
Like 5 seconds later, I'm like frothing at the mouth, bouncing off the walls. My mom's like, "What happened? You had 1 glass of soda." And it's like, "That's where you're wrong, Mom."
It sounds like when people come to my house, except it's with wine, and my mom is just constantly topping them up. They don't realize.
Your mom's a gem.
We got our talent manager from Worlds very drunk, not realizing that we'd continuously topped up her glass of wine. It was quite funny.
Wine's dangerous, man. You got to be careful.
But also in the US, it broke my brain when I saw a double. Is it a big gulp or a double gulp from 7-Eleven?
I mean, the big gulp is already bigger than anything you can buy.
There's no reason.
Yeah.
You don't need that much of a soda. It's just absurd.
Yeah. I remember my uncle like loved ultra big gulps. We're getting a little off topic, but this is what it's about this morning.
Ultra big.
Whatever. He loved Coca-Cola more than anything.
Yeah.
The other uncle loved Coke. We don't talk about him as much. Coca-Cola more than anything. And there was a year where he's like, I'm cutting back. It's too much. He went to Diet Coke. Coke Zero wasn't out yet. And he's like, I'm cutting back. And we're like, all right, good for you, Uncle Bob. And he's like, I'm going from a triple big gulp to a double big gulp. And everyone's like, good job. And I was like, I'm like 12. I'm like, what? He's cut it down by 20 ounces from 80 ounces to 60. It's like... America slips in. You don't think you're a part of it, and then you look back at your childhood and you're like, I am also part of the America kind of moments.
It doesn't make any... You just don't need that much of anything in your life. Even the giant coffees as well just is insane to me. I don't know. I will have my cup of coffee in the morning. I'm like, that's my caffeine. I'm happy now.
No, I'll say on international events, especially like All-Star Vegas, whatever, I wasn't sleeping really well. And I would just go down to the casino floor where there's a Starbucks. Vegas is a weird place. And just like slam 20, whatever the biggest big size Starbucks has of like cold brew with shots in it. That was degen.
Yeah.
But I do recognize now being in Europe and looking at other people, I'm like, maybe this isn't normal. Maybe we need to chill a little bit in America. Just like, just a tiny bit of a cutback. Maybe not. Maybe you guys can say what you feel, how you feel. What you're
Look, live your life the way you want to, all right?
Obviously live the life your way.
For it.
Yeah. That's the thing. You got to accept that people are either not going to care or they're going to judge you, but you shouldn't care about how they feel about it. Before we get into the day proper, since we're off topic already, we haven't done a media check-in in a while. What have you been watching?
Oh.
What have you been into? I feel like, and if you've been watching or engaging in anything at home, I feel like there's an eternal quest to find the best content to consume. So if you have any recommendations, feel free to pop them in the comments.
Yeah. Well, see, the problem is I have a problem when it comes to consuming media, where I will either love a show and think it is the best thing I have ever watched, and I will get about 3 to 4 episodes in, and I will never watch that show ever again.
Wait, so the show that you love, that you're absolutely obsessed with, you
really enjoy.
You will only
think it's great. And then I'll watch about 4 episodes, and then something will happen. It could be like I go for work for a week or whatever. I just will not have the time to watch the show for about a week, and then it never existed to me apart from those first 4 episodes that I really, really enjoyed. But I can never go back to that again. Okay. It's been too long.
So I have a recommendation then for you.
Okay.
Altered Carbon on Netflix.
I did watch it, actually.
It's
one of the few I did.
Damn it. Because the first like 3 episodes are absolute fire, and then it just goes off a cliff.
No, it's like I watched the first 5 episodes, I think, of Breaking Bad. Thought it was great. Never watched it again. I've done it, but I've played so many different shows where I'm like, this is incredible. It took me a long time to get through Game of Thrones for that reason. Where it was like, okay, I can watch the first few, and then 3-4 months later, I came back to the next.
That's kind of an enigma. Like I have a friend who will watch like 1 episode every couple of days of a show, and that's crazy behavior. But this is even crazier.
Do you want to know?
Everyone I know binges. It's just like you have a day off, you just blitz an entire show and just like run through the entire emotional gambit of this like really complex drama in like 6 hours.
Yeah, and the reason I know it's a problem is because I think I said this. Maybe I said this to you the other day. So I found this new Korean show that I was like, oh, this looks amazing. This is really, really cool. It's about an 1.5 hour long episode. That's fine. I'll go and watch it. But halfway through the first episode, I realized this wasn't a TV series. This was a movie. And immediately I wanted to turn it off because I didn't want to watch a movie. And that's when I realized I have a problem with media where I don't understand what happens, but I don't want to.
So you would watch a 90-minute TV show, but you wouldn't watch an 1.5 hour movie.
And I don't know why. And that's when I finished it because I was like, no, now I have to finish it because I've realized I have a problem. But I've realized I now have a problem with whatever it is about consuming media that I suck at.
I will say, of all the people that I've talked to in my life that have opened a conversation with, I have a problem, this one's pretty chill. You know, like all things considered, like all the things that could have come out of your mouth, I think that's, like, that's a you problem. At least it's not extended. It's not like your inability to finish a movie is negatively affecting the relationships in your life. So
that's why I'm very proud when I'm able to make a pop culture reference because I'm like, I actually
don't understand.
You don't understand the turmoil.
You think we're all just having a great time watching Game of Thrones, making references to the Mother of Dragons?
I'm sweaty.
Back in like 2017, 2016, whatever. No, Rob's like, you don't understand. It took me 1.5 months to get through that episode. I just had to stop. I got distracted.
That being said, I did last week binge watch The Gentleman.
The series.
It was really, really good.
Yes. Guy Ritchie makes mostly the same movies with the same characters and the same actors, but it doesn't matter.
I haven't seen any other Guy Ritchie movies.
But every single person you've said that to has been pushing.
Yeah.
If you want a gangster film and usually a UK gangster setup, depending on the movie, Guy Ritchie, fantastic.
But and then I started watching The 3 Body Problem. Really, really good. But the problem is, it has now been a 4-day period. Probably going to be a 5-day period. So this could easily turn into one of those shows that I really enjoy and then just never watch again.
Rob, come on. That's all right. Okay. Honestly, I've just been binge watching bad anime. Shangri-La Frontier. I started watching Delicious in Dungeon, which is like It's a weird combination of like dungeon adventure anime and cooking anime, which I vibe with as someone who liked food. Did you ever watch Food Wars?
I saw some clips of it.
I can't, in good consciousness, recommend Food Wars. I do enjoy it. I think it's good, but it's obviously very explicit, is how I'll describe. There's some shoulder content that you might not associate with food that comes up every episode. I don't want to go into more details.
Oh, okay.
Just say it's pretty standard for anime. Delicious in Dungeon, though. Also fire. Shangri-La Frontier, to be fair, not like terrible, just yet another, I woke up in another world. Or I'm in
Food Wars Shokugeki no Soma.
Yes,
I did see some of that.
Then you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's just say people really enjoy food in that anime, in that particular one. Also a book. Weird, I know, right? A Memory of Empire. This was recommended by Ender, by Arcady Martin. Highly recommended if you like sci-fi and political thrillers. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's like this woman exists in like crazy space future where there's like this Aztecan society that's kind of like, or Aztecan inspired society that's like dominating the universe, and she's like an ambassador sent there, and there's all this drama and stuff. It's very good, very cool. Bit dry if you prefer like actiony stuff, but still like it. So recommend. Yeah, let us know what you're watching. What Rob should watch exactly 2 episodes of before he gives up on, and what I will maybe watch potentially. Oh, also Mashal, which is just Harry Potter One Punch Man. So shout out to Mashal.
That actually sounds interesting.
It's Harry Potter One Punch Man. Again, like, you know exactly what you're going to get. Betty said it best, though. Everyone, like, it's like a pretty simple show. The animation isn't great, but every once in a while they just like really put the money into like one scene, and it always catches you off guard. You're like, the character moves like this 90% of the time, and then there's like the one scene where there's like insane animation on his fist, and you're like, what? It's kind of nice. I actually kind of like it. It's cool. They do a lot of cool things in that show. Anyway, as much as I would love to continue to talk about anime or Gears of War, we talked about Gears of War a little bit on cast this week. We didn't get to go deeper. We'll talk about that another time. A lot of nostalgia in this day and age. Instead, we're going to talk about the things that happened just this previous weekend. And we're going to kind of run you through first, or I'll run you through with the support of Rob, the results. It was a 4-day weekend. We played 8 best of 3s. So if you don't feel like you 100% have a grasp on everything that happened, that's okay.
We don't either.
We don't either. This will feel like a kind of like a previously on the LEC. So if you want to put on your favorite anime music, you know, whatever in the background while we do this. Previously on the LEC. So top 8 teams made it through. Obviously, Rogue and Casey eliminated. First and second got to pick their opponents. Fnatic picked GX. Vitality picked SK. That left G2 MDK and Team Heretics BDS. So that brings us into the weekend. Fnatic 2-0 GX, G2 2-0 MDK. Vitality play a pretty messy 2-1 with SK. And then BDS really cleanly, kind of the surprise of us, because we expected this to be one of the closer series, 2-0 Team Heretics. And normally that's enough content for a week, but now there are 2 more days of games. So that's enough for an entire episode of Euphoria. So we'll of course reference those series and talk more about them as it's relevant for the upcoming games and more for those teams. But bear with me, because now we do the next thing. Okay, now you have upper bracket where Fnatic G2 play for the millionth time. G2 pretty just handedly smashed Fnatic.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, we'll go into more detail, obviously, as we get later, but that's pretty much the summary. BDS, then 2-1 Vitality, who looked uncharacteristically shaky after what was a pretty convincing, or not super convincing performance versus SK, but like a pretty convincing game 3 versus SK. Maybe says more about SK. Not sure. And then we have the loser side of the bracket, which was SK Team Heretics. And did I just not refresh this? I did just not refresh this. It doesn't have to. There we go. Leaguepedia. Great website. Team Heretics 2-1 to SK. That was which is a series we cast yesterday. We cast full 6 games yesterday. We were dead by the end of the day. If you listen to our last game of the day, it was not that we weren't excited about the teams. Is that we literally felt like we felt like zombies. We gave it all. And then GX versus Mad Lions Koi, which was also a 3-game series, 2-1. Yeah, so a lot happened. We've already eliminated 2 teams. I don't know if you want spoiler alerts at home, but you've already clearly missed the window. SK and Giant X have been eliminated. So I think maybe that's where we should start, Rob.
Yeah. Basically, the quick run through is it is winter, except featuring Heretics instead of SK.
Yeah, which is crazy how much it's lined up. That's why people are always like, oh, the script, haha. But I'm like, guys, our script writers kind of trash sometimes. Like, really hit miss. Like, if you think that this is scripted.
Look, there with the strikes, we're still trying to play catch up.
The writer strike's hitting hard. The American writer strikes. Oh, God, what are we going to do here? Sorry, guys. We just, in solidarity stopped trying on the script. Just stop putting effort in. No, not a scripted match. And which is really actually sad in the case for SK, because if it was scripted, at least they could say, hey, that's how the script played out. Instead, they have to live with their own really tragic performance. So starting off with SK, this series, SK Team Heretics, Vitality SK, we'll start there. Let's talk about the journey of SK, which will give you some insight into Vitality and also kind of explain where this team has now left us at. Series versus Vitality was messy on both sides. Neither team walked away from that looking like they had 100% grasp on or was 100% the superior team. Game 1 and Game 2 both had Baron steals from the team that was on the losing side. Game 1 was firmly in control of SK. Then they gave away a Baron. Then it took Irrelevant on the bot side with a nice little flank on that bot side brush next to the tier 2 to kind of bring them back in. They got the win. It felt like, hey, SK. All right. Nice. They're going to take this series back. And then Game 2, Rob.
No. Immediately no. To be fair, though, hero performance from Carzzy. Yes. Because that game could have been the SK win. And then 100%. Carzzy just was like, screw 100%. This, I'm taking it over. I think he even said in the interview after, he was just like, I'm very glad that my teammates were able to control Game 3 because I had nothing left.
He had nothing left after Game 2.
Boomed me,
Yeah.
But I was a bit dubious on the Zilean for Hylissang, but the speed up on Carzzy into I'm just going to murder Zeri every time she approaches mid lane wave was really, really nice. But this was not clean League of Legends, as you said. The setup on objectives from Vitality was not great. Like, they never really get deep vision control, which meant that we ended up having a ton of these Baron steals that were coming through because no one could really spot where anyone was coming from, or people weren't in position to try and keep Isma out of the pit. So it ended up just being very, very messy as a whole. And again, I think it's a bit for what is supposed to be our top team coming through from LEC, this was not a series that kind of put faith in Vitality for me.
Most successful team in the regular season. I think that's the big question. I think Vitality have a high range of performance. Their best days, they look really good. And I don't know if it's the coaching staff, if they just like feel like they really want to empower the players and how they want to play the game, rather than having like one cohesive overarching ideal to play for. And maybe they're still figuring that out. But it was slops from Vitality, which is concerning. For SK, like, they dropped down, right? So, their results, we don't have to ask as many questions about them anymore. We've seen the results kind of spoke for themselves. But for Vitality, I think the extra context is needed. This is a team that is super, super fallible. Photon looks incredible, right? Like, I think that Photon continues to be an isolation standout for this team. Douglas looks good. Coordination is good overall this weekend, or better than it has been. But a lot of people are really eager. I talked about this in the last episode to be like, Douglas. And I think it's like, Douglas is doing all right, guys. Let's not crown him before he gets on the throne, guys. It's like one step at a time.
I think it's still Hylissang controlling a lot of the early game for them.
Yeah.
I think you can see Douglas is doing good stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like, I really like his transitional ganks when he's like, killer 3 camps top and then starts to move bot. Oftentimes burns a summoner spell mid as he, does so. But I still look at Hylissang as the main proponent for, I'm going to run. Like the Senna game he had, I can't remember what.
Game 1.
Was it game 1? Yeah, where he was just consistently topside, moving back and forth between mid and top and making sure that they're going to be fine. So I still look at Hylissang as the one that controls the early game for Vitality. And then Douglas is there to support him in certain occasions, but it's not. And no, that's not to bash Douglas. Well, it's just, it is mostly Hilly dictating how that early game goes.
And he had some good moments. VTO tragically kind of just dies on a level 3 gank, essentially the same way 2 games in a row in the series. Gets one back in game 3, but Douglas is good about, leveraging that brief moment where your mid laner has been killed, but is now going to, TP back. You know that enemy jungle doesn't have flash. They use that moment well to steal a red buff away. Like, he's not, I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to undersell him. This is just kind of in response to, I think, a lot of people being really keen to prop him up. He's doing solid, guys. He's doing solid. Yeah. But I think he still needs more time before he's going to hit those same levels.
The takeaway from me for this series was Carzzy deserves to be in the conversation, if not the best AD carry in LEC. Because that performance was heroic in game 2.
I mean, it was, yeah.
And consistently, he was putting himself into positions to try and be the big carry. And I respect AD carries who do that a huge amount because it's it's kind of easy to be a passenger princess at times and just go, hey, I'm going to do my job and do whatever I need to. But realistically, I think the best AD carries in the world, when you look at the guys who actually make the difference and are the most respected, it's the ones who are willing to put themselves in harm's way, but without playing the moment. And that's what you see Carsey do so consistently. So I've been really, really impressed with Carsey, especially after that game too. But I think we still see the problems with Vitality. And I think you were laughing at me because you said I willed it into existence, but it's
you're like, look, they've struggled with the objective setup. What do Vitality do like 30 seconds after you say that? They start a Baron with like no vision control over the enemy jungle, and like Isma just gets to walk up to the edge of the pit and steal it.
Yeah, and that's why when we look at them during the regular split, the teams that they lost to were, G2, Fnatic, and then in the they lost SK as well, but then in the playoffs, they end up losing to BDS as well, which we'll chat about in a little bit. But I definitely think this is a team that until they understand how to set up their vision control and how to play side lanes, reset about the 50 seconds and get to Dragon and get that vision in their favor, I think are going to struggle against teams that are able to punish that very effectively. And BDS, G2, Fnatic, all teams that can do that.
And to me, these are teams and players, and I've seen them on rosters that do this stuff. So I don't think it's that they're not capable. I think it's that they're clearly looking at the game maybe in a different way in some of these circumstances where they're not prioritizing that stuff as much. And it's just not, it just feels like an unnecessary risk, right? Like you can just slow down. You can play it a little bit simpler. Yeah. I like when they get bloodthirsty. I like teams that are willing to get aggressive. I like what we saw when MDK are a team to do that as well. Mm-hmm. But there's a balancing act, right? Where once you have an advantage, you need to be really aware of the risks that you're taking, because when you're at an even state in the game or you're behind, I don't mind if you want to take low percentage plays to try to find a way back in, or, because you have faith in your hands that you can out execute, or you're playing maybe for a little bit of the intangibles here and there. Great. But when you're ahead, chill.
Yeah. I think it's also, I can see there are trade-offs and risk rewards that they're trying to play around. So for example, there was one game that I'm watching, it was Video, I think, on Syndra, so whatever game that was, there's a dragon that's about to spawn. Video is pushing on top side, but it's when you take a risk, commit to the risk, and it seems that seems to be a lot of the problems at times, where it's like Video can push the side lane, they will give up the control over the dragon so that then Video can get that top tower, and that's fine with me if you're going to commit to that play. But then Video doesn't and it doesn't know, do I fully commit to top tower? Do I then start to drift down? He starts to drift down, then double checks himself, drifts back up to top tower. And it's this non-commitment to something that is coming back to bite them. And I think that's where, again, they're going to struggle with teams that are just more decisive in that moment. Fnatic and G2 and the other top teams coming through from from our standings.
In the vast majority of situations, right, a bad call made together is better than making the right call in isolation, right? Like, you really need to have those moments where you can, whatever the call is, make it, right? SK in this series, solid game one. Irrelevant continues to be a standout, but just a lot of really rough moments across the board in some of these games. Some of the drafts a little bit difficult. DOS, an abysmal game three. I think it would be easy to kind of put the entire
Bard, man.
Well, the Bard game too, I was like, okay. I actually liked the Zillion response from Hilly because it's just kind of like out-greeting. Like, I'll just outscale you in terms of
it's
value.
Just the ultimates were way too inconsistent on the Bard.
Yeah.
There's so many times he just whiffed on people that don't, not even targeting people that don't have flash, or just ulting into the middle of nowhere. And it was just
the one around Dragon that you highlighted where he's like worried about support for some reason instead of just hitting the carries and looking for the setup.
Jungle and support, or jungle and mid had no flash, and he just was like,
and SK didn't have a good weekend, right? Like, you can point out individual mistakes across the board. DOS certainly had 2 back-to-back rough games, I think. The Camille game as well, much more indicative. And once they started to fall behind in that game, it just felt completely and totally hopeless. Also, stop, for the love of God, giving Hilly Rakan.
Yeah,
this man is good at it. Like, you see why teams are prioritizing it towards the end of the week as first pick, which I don't agree with. But when you look at the overall comfort level and what teams are able to accomplish with this champion compared to how they look normally on something like a Nautilus or one of the other. If not the best top 2 Rakan in our region, I'm just going to say the best. Haven't seen Nicky play in a long time. Historically, it's obviously Hilly.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind. But I don't have... Alvaro also has a pretty solid Rakan. So it's not... It's Hilly, but it's not like Hilly and then a fat gap. I think there are other people keeping it close.
More Braum for Alvaro. I think Alvaro's a really, really good Braum.
Alvaro is a really good Braum.
I think it's Hilly's definitely the Rakan guy.
Yeah. This season, I'll give you the Alvaro Braum. Last season, Alvaro Rakan was hitting. So then, SK, they kind of 2-1 the series. It's really messy. It's back and forth. They're playing up against a Team Heretics lineup that didn't look like they showed up to their series versus BDS. That's what I'm going to say. That series was crushing. And so kind of coming into this series, right, Team Heretics have already obviously made it through now. They did end up winning the series. But coming into the series, I actually was like, all right, if SK, recover, they're looking pretty good because Team Heretics looked dizzy against BDS. They really shot themselves in the foot in draft, I feel like, multiple times. Made the game so much harder than it needed to be. It would be easy to just distill it down to the drafts were bad, but also in game, they just the coordination wasn't there, the confidence wasn't there from this team. And I think you can tell, even from the interview that they had after winning this series eventually versus SK, they are an emotional team. This confidence is a really big thing for them. Flack had talked about it in the post-game interview with Trouble. And the confidence was absolutely not there. If you're going to pick a lane-dominant AD carry, please pick a winning support matchup, or at least a support matchup that gets prio. Please don't just throw that away by picking Alistar. These Alistar picks this weekend were bad. Some circumstances they were okay and it just didn't work out, but this was bad. These were some bad Alistar picks, man.
Yeah, and there's always more that goes into just picking a champion, right? It's what does the team feel comfortable with, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of hard to know what conversations were going on behind the scenes, but it just didn't hit. And especially when, later on in their game 3 versus SK, I think Trimby played a great Melio. So they're obviously comfortable playing with Enchantress and stuff like that. It just felt weird that they weren't willing to be more flexible with their picks. But yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking to see what they look like in their earlier series against BDS, where BDS just stomped them. And I think it's still kind of prevalent in their game against SK was just, Heretics have no early game. The entire way through was just hey, we can try and match some of these early plays, but they don't feel comfortable playing around a specific lane.
Yeah.
They weren't playing into bot side. They could sometimes play around Zvyro in the mid lane, but honestly, it just kind of felt like hero plays in the mid game, specifically from Zvyro at times, that brought them back from the brink. But I wasn't looking at that game going, oh yeah, Heretics stomped any of these, or Heretics came alive on this play, or trying to play around this guy in this lane. It was just kind of hey, we will chill. We will get to a point where we have the late game scaling, and that's a little bit worrying because I've seen plenty of teams say we have late game scaling, but we still understand how we can get advantages for our team despite that. And that was not what I saw from Heretics.
I think we didn't really see a lot of lane dominance, at least in the first 2 games of the series, from anyone on Heretics. I don't think we saw a lot of early jungle activity from Jankos. I think Vi is trash. Obviously, there's more nuance there in general, but that's the headline of my opinions on Vi. I think this champion, when she falls behind, does nothing, and I don't think that teams are good. Most teams are good enough at pushing early leads to really make this champion work. There are obviously great games for it, but I think you can see in the Team Heretics game some of the reasons why I dislike the champion. Obviously, it's a single game. It's a single example. But when, Jankos isn't able to find early advantages, Maokai just outscales, outvalues. And it's very clear that after that single attempt at playing, something that's going to have or need to have a little bit more early game priority, we just instantly switch into Sejuani Maokai trades, which I think work out a little bit better. But yeah, I agree. Team Heretics early game, this series didn't feel great. They placed a lot of priority on kind of giving Trimby range supports instead of conventional engage options. Some of that is because a lot of stuff was banned away. There was a lot of Nautilus Rel bans this series. Rel, of course, kind of just a permanent ban, but we saw a lot more Nautilus bans. Maybe a call out to Trimby specifically because it was a consistent focus for SK to just take that off of them. But there are a lot of concerns. I think the good news is Flack had quietly had a really solid series, delivered in every way that you could want as a carry. Again, I don't think that he was the one making the plays, but he was everywhere that he needed to be, had great stats. Spyro, the big standout to me. There were a lot of moments from Trimby, or the Trimby Bard game. If you watch that, he has a great moment where he catches Exakick. Exakick probably deserves a lot of questions for this week's performance. On social media, he was saying that he wasn't playing at an LEC level, and if you want to understand why, this series would be pretty clear evidence why he feels that way. But it is Trimby who catches him. It is the follow-up from Zvyro in that fight around the Baron, yeah. Baron.
He walked up too far. And I don't know if it was supposed to be a hands check. Because there is an argument where Exakick walks up, gets a couple of pop shots onto the enemy AD carry, ults up, throws feathers down, you get the play. So I can half see what he was going for, but he just walks into the Maokai W from Jankos and you're like, oh, now you can't ult. You weren't quick enough on it. And he knew that Jankos was there. So he had the opportunity to ult. And then Zwire just able to fly into the back line after he flashes away and gets him on the Azir. So, and there was a second moment in the third game where he tries to do it again. And it's like, this could be a hands check. You have flash. You have the ability to get away from it.
Yeah, you have to anticipate the combo, and he just doesn't.
I just don't know. I'd love to chat to him because it felt to me like he was trying to hands diff and then just couldn't.
Yeah. Hold that thought, because I want to make sure we wrap up Heretics here. So the good news is bot lane the last game was great. They kind of... Actually, the last game's kind of fake.
The Melio counter was so good.
The Melio counter was good. The last game's kind of fake. We'll talk about that game in a second. But game 2, I think Heretics did a really good job coming alive. I really like what we saw from Zviro on his ear. He, like many of our rookies, felt like, kind of Nico or bust in terms of like maximum output. If you put him on that champion, he looks great. Otherwise, he looks okay. He's got some good moments. He's got some bad moments. But these were some great Azir games from him.
Yeah, and I know a lot of Heretics fans were saying watch out as soon as Azir is back because this was a great
This is a control mage guy. Yeah. But you want to be able to see that, right? Because a lot of the control mages, again, you talk about passenger princesses, a lot of control mages, when they are in meta, they're vibing. They're waiting for somebody else to set them up so they can do their damage. Azir obviously doesn't have to do that, and that's part of the reason why he's incredibly obnoxious, incredibly powerful. But they really make the most of it, and they really shut down that game 2. Game 3 is fake data for me. Sadly, it's a good draft from Team Heretics, but this was the final nail in the coffin for SK for me. I felt like this game was lost in draft. I felt like I knew it in cast. I tried really hard not to be too critical. I don't think I wore it. I was really critical. And it's not just because of Lucian Nami, which does show up in the draft. And if you know me, you know that I hate this duo. But
the thing that you didn't get to see on cast, half the time I look over at Drakos, I just see him go, and just hands everywhere.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What is happening?
I'm looking at the camera where I know production can see me. I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we here? Like, what the hell is this team doing? SK in their final game, they first pick Maokai. Enemy team goes Azir Jinx. It's clearly just like the scaling off. Zeri is banned. Maybe there's room to pick Xayah again. But for whatever reason, SK decide that this is the game where they're going to play early game really well. And, if you look at what you highlighted, Rob, Team Heretics hadn't been playing early game. Well, there's a reason there's a reason to believe that that's where you can attack them. You have already locked in Maokai, though, so it's not like you're a powerhouse in the early game, and they kind of just assume they're going to get the handshake on the jungle matchup, which is crazy, but they do. So, hey, it works. And then you just end up with, Renekton for Irrelevant, which he does great on individually up until the entire map falls apart, and then Corki for Niski. And so we have a situation where if you want to win this game against Jinx, Milio, Azir, and 2 tanks, you need to play really well, and you need to push your advantages. And to be clear, like, Lucian Nami is good. It doesn't instantly win the lane at early levels, and it certainly doesn't instantly win the lane against Milio Jinx, who can, mitigate so much of the aggressive options. And SK were not up for that challenge. Mm-hmm. I think this was so unnecessary for them to put this high level of execution on their shoulders when we've heard from Swiffer in the past that they are also a team that needs that confidence. And when that confidence gets shot, it gets harder and harder to make decisions as a group. And this is a game, an elimination game where you needed to play flawlessly. And instead of trying to simplify, they make it so much harder. And keep in mind, the Aurelian Soul that did so much for them in game 1 as an answer into the Azir is up. Is available, is there. There is other stuff that they can draft here. It is not like they were pushed off into this option. They had other choices, and this draft was infuriating to me because I feel like to me what this reads as, and I'm going to put words in people's mouth here, so this is just my take, is like, hey, look, either we're good enough to play this or we don't deserve to be here. And they weren't good enough to play it, and sadly for all of these players, it wasn't just a hard game. It wasn't just a losing game. It was a truly terrible game.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, which was SK kind of need the confidence to have decision-making be good as a group.
Yeah.
And this is a composition for me that needs exactly that. You have to be able to play off of Maokai Lucian, to set up for poke onto a carry, to follow up with Corki, and then use the Corki package to separate the team after you've kind of dissuaded one of the carries from being involved. And then you essentially take the team fight when the enemy is down a carry. Whether that's because you've actually killed them or because they've been poked out so hard, it's so difficult to try and step up past the package. That's not what they did at all. You can see so many times, especially that there's the mid lane fight.
The mid lane fight
tier
is
1
where you watch this team die.
Yeah.
Like you can literally watch this team lose all hope in real time if you watch back game 3.
Yeah, big time. And it's just seeing Niski go in with that package as the culling starts to be opened, you're just like, what are we doing here, lads?
The package comes
about
in
this.
as the Maokai ult is starting, but is too far away to hit anybody. The CC can't stack up. They instantly turn and kill Niski. Then in a last-ditch effort, presumably to... I don't know. Maybe you feel like this is it. If I don't, we're already doomed. I might as well try. Might as well give it a shot. We see a pretty half-hearted effort to turn back for the rest of the team with all the cooldowns gone, with Vitality Team Heretics essentially unscathed. And that is like, it's hard. That moment is hard as a caster. I imagine it's even, I have no doubt that it's infinitely harder for the players on stage. But I like, there's not a lot to say in that moment other than every single player on this team just, the moment that play fails and everyone kind of commits to it one at a time, lemming style done. Anyway, it feels like, you've just gone for the honorable. You've gone for the honorable death. You know what I mean? Like it feels like that's what it's an attempt at, and it was really sad to watch.
Yeah, because at that stage, it kind of hits a death at 1,000 cuts because they get control, they get towers, they get to scale with the Jinx.
And that's, it's a slow game because it's a Jinx's ear, right? Like they need more time to get bigger advantages. They still have to play respectfully because of their composition. SK are still really strong at certain points in the game. And so you just watch, like they're already dead and now we're going to watch a 20-minute funeral procession, which is the rest of that game, right? Which is abysmal.
Rough.
Yeah. And I think for SK this weekend, right, I think XKick had a really rough weekend. I think in their first series, DOS was rough. I think Niski, who had been a shining light for them across most of the regular season, has had a really, really rough couple of series. Game 1 was great. Game 1 felt like a return to form on that Aurelion Soul. Nice matchup into Azir. Shout out to Vigar V2, who was roasting me for speaking incorrectly about that matchup. I'm always open to learn. Also, Vigar V2, smart guy, right? But Azir obviously, or Niski obviously doing great in that game 1, and then the Talia game 2, it just really wasn't working. And then in game 3, it just, I'm not going to put it on any one player on that team, but like, it obviously fell apart. And Niski was also there for those moments where it fell apart. He's the one packaging in a little too early. Yeah. Or maybe you want to argue that Isma's the one ulting a little too late. Who knows? But like, everybody's a part of that final little travesty.
But that's the thing. It is a team that has to work together to make this composition work, and the communication wasn't there. If you want to open up at XKick's ult, as maybe as you say, Maokai goes in, or at least you just let him unleash with the culling, get people low, and then you look for the play after. But this was just all over the joint.
I don't know what SK. I'm not going to tell you that I have the perfect insight into what SK should have done because I'm not there for their scrims. I don't know what those players need to feel confident to execute, but based on all available stage information, this was a horrendous decision in draft. To let them go on stage with this draft was highly questionable. Now, if it had worked, we would have called it one of the boldest, one of the craziest kind of bets ever. And we would have said they believed in themselves in that moment, and that's what really mattered. And it would have been a cool sports story, But they stacked the odds against themselves, which is a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Excuse me, I am very surprised when we saw the Lucian Ami locked in. And I kind of shared your sentiment of I just didn't expect that to be the pick that you go for.
Yeah.
And even as we were going through the draft, I think from the Thresh ban for me was also bizarre. Yes, Trimby is a good Thresh, but the Melio was such an obvious take-up. It's into everything you have. The Melio was obscene.
All think like called out in draft. It's like, yeah, okay, Maokai doesn't work anymore. Congrats, Renekton can't stun your backline. It's hard for Renekton to do anything because no one's really a good dive buddy for him. Maokai maybe, but like you've got shielding for the corky poke. And this is the second, the hokey pokey. And this is the second game in a row that Trimby just gets to outgreed in the support matchup. And it worked, and we've seen this second game. We saw it from Hilly in the other series with the Zillion and DeBard, and it just works really good against SK. SK keep putting themselves in these positions where enemy support could just pick something that outscales, and they're just ruined. I don't know what happened. I guess just it's these Nautilus bans that just continue to come out, opening up the pool a bit more. But it looked good for Team Heretics in this last game, and it looked like a travesty. I think for XKick, had a lot of rough moments. I think he's the guy who's going to get looked at a lot this week. And what I will say is he is a player who I think there's like this razor line that he has to walk for confidence that seems to be when he can really perform, where if he's underconfident, he plays bad, and if he's overconfident, he plays bad. And we've seen it lock in a couple times across last year and this year where it really, really works, and he looks really, really fantastic. And I don't know how he stays on that line, how he walks that line, but like we've seen both sides. We've seen Exekick who's too cocky. We've seen Exekick who doesn't believe in himself, and both those Exekicks are bad. But we've also seen an Exekick who shows up and like kicks ass and takes names. So I hope for his sake he can get back to that, because I don't want to pretend that he had a good weekend. There's no saving face here in his abysmal weekend. He's not the only Zeri that randomly jumped into 1 million people on the enemy team. There were many. Noah, Supa. This is a trend. I don't know why everyone wants to do this. Why you just want to leap in Zeri and go, this is my time to die.
The ult does so much damage.
With the ult does so much, as we've learned from the Silas game in our other series. But, obviously, just a really, really bad week. And I'm just hoping that this is a guy who can recover and find out how to get in that spot that allows him to perform, those situations that allow him to perform. Because if he can't, sadly, he spent much more time on either side of that razor's edge than he has in the middle. And I think that is starting to become his reputation from last year, where we looked at him as this promising talent. He's now starting to be a guy who can't find that footing.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, because I always prefer to see an AD carry who's over aggressive, because you can always walk that line back versus trying to jumpstart a non-aggressive person into that role.
Yeah.
But when you're flip-flopping between either side of that line, it's never really helpful, because you don't know exactly what you need. And it does feel like it's just a confidence boost for himself, but I don't know how you try and find it. And especially for SK, it's quite frustrating, to be honest, because you kind of see Winter last year, Winter this year, they look somewhat decent. Gets the playoffs, all falls apart. Spring then becomes even worse. And it's just like, what's happening, lads? Why is this a consistent trend where you come in all guns blazing? It looks good for the start. I mean, they went 3-0 in the start of Winter.
Yeah.
Same as last year. And you're just like, well, do you get nothing for it? This team is just, you never really know what you're going to get. And on days, as you say, where it all comes together, they look fantastic. And then the next day you get games like this where nothing seems to work out at all for them. I just wish there was some consistency with them.
I do too. I think we can kind of wrap it up there. Hearts out to SK, to support Step behind the scenes. I know that this is hard, and that your punishment is living, having to watch games without being able to play, not actually getting the chance to improve.
Yeah, 10 weeks.
And I hope that this is a mental reset and that you can come back stronger, right? Like, this is not an easy thing. And one other team joins them, and that is GX. GX had a bit more of an optimistic week in many moments, even if they share the same fate. I think their game 1 against Fnatic, they got essentially 1v9'd by Humanoid Azir.
Yeah.
This is also a Lucian Nami game. It shows up a lot this week, and I don't think that, it wasn't necessarily the best game in bottom lane from Noah and Jun, but it wasn't terrible either. But this game wasn't really about them. So just to be clear, I want to make sure I'm acknowledging I didn't have as much of a problem with Lucian Nami here. Kind of nicely works in the context of the comp in the early game, even if it didn't maybe hit as like it does in other regions still. But Humanoid Azir was huge, right? Like Jackie's had some nice mechanical moments. Aragon highlighted him on the desk, but he's like up 1 million CS. He's on side lanes. He wins the 1v1 on side lane. He's winning team fights. He's split pushing like a god. Like, if you ever want to understand why people call Humanoid the best Azir in our league, watch that game.
Yeah, but this draft from Chinex was ballsy as shit. Like, when I come into this, I'm just like, we're going up against Humanoid.
Rob. Yes, it was. To the point. That's effective use of the English language.
It's like, you've got a rookie that you have handpicked through this algorithm that you're bringing in.
Yeah, this is your Moneyball player, baby.
Yeah, and you're going up against Humanoid, and you're going, we're going to completely shift the entire identity that we have of our team to then have melee mids and Odoamne on TF top. That's insane to me, to do that going up against. And look, if it had maybe worked where you'd managed to get some of those, because in the first, 8 minutes, we probably had 20 to 50 ganks mid coming through onto Humanoid.
And you just lived.
No hyperbole.
Yeah.
But it's just insane how often they were trying to get Humanoid and they just couldn't quite get it to work. And we were all watching and we're backstage and we're like, the second you saw Humanoid get that solo kill on the top side against Jackie's, and you can be like, oh, well, the creep took the E, from Akali meant they couldn't get the kill. It doesn't matter. The second that kill went across, the game was done because he couldn't control side lanes against the Azir anymore. This entire composition needed to try and play side lanes. And also the Odo just wasn't able to get enough control to actually do very much into the K'Sante or the Rek'Sai. So the whole plan, the wheels just came off. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see. And yes, there were mechanically strong points for Fnatic, but it just felt so bizarre to me to see this entire identity shift coming into playoffs from Chinex.
And while it took, 1,000,001 or 1,000,000 ganks before they got one to work, around 10 minutes, they're not getting anything. And they do finally get Jackie's a couple kills, and it looks like it's going to be okay, but he's just down so much CS. The gold lead isn't there, and I think he's really close to getting the 1v1 kill on sideline, and maybe that makes more of a difference. But yeah, Mark Brazda on a sideline, man. This man putting in work. And Giant X, I kind of in classic Giant X fashion, when the chips are down, they always go for they always try to make these big plays, these big last ditch, which I really appreciate because there's a lot of teams who just die quietly. Giant X are not a team who die quietly more often than not. They're willing to take the low percentage plays to try to find a way back in. But in this case, in game 1, at least just kind of hastened their own demise. Game 2 was better, though. Again, another TF game. The Yone looked better. It survived a lot of ganks early. It had some good moments. But like you said, it still felt like we witnessed the team rebuild their entire identity and their entire draft strategy around making Jackie's comfortable. And what's actually painful here is that in this series, it felt like, why did you do this? And in the next series, it felt like, why didn't you stick to your guns? So they're going to get both versions of criticism for us, where in this series, it didn't make sense. But in the next series they play, now they're just slamming Azir at every opportunities, and Jackie's doesn't look like a world-class Azir player. He looks okay.
Yeah.
And then we're like, just pick a lane, guys, because this is the series versus like Frescow, he's just picking Ahri because he's comfortable on it and he's popping off in this MDK series. In the losers bracket that we played yesterday, where we're like, okay, but maybe now just do the thing. Like, what is going on, man? Like, pick a lane. I don't care what lane you pick, but please pick one. Like, you're making it hard for yourself, just swapping back and forth between these two ways or the things that you want to get out of Jackie's.
Especially when I don't think MDK are the best at playing side lanes. It'd actually be cool to see you try and do this style. If this is a style that you have practiced as much, brilliant. Bring it out for this series as well, because I think it could be something that works. But yeah, I find it a little bit harder to criticize Giant X, though, for their drafts in this game. Because are they serious? Because realistically, they could have easily been the winners of this series.
We're on to the second series now, yeah?
Second series between MDK and Giant X.
I agree. It was very close.
It's very hard to criticize as much because it was they nearly got it across the line. But as you say, for Scowie, some of these charms were heroic. The one he got on Odo Omni in bot lane as they're pushing in towards the tier 2, just scooting it past the creep that he takes the aggro off of to open up the angle onto Odo Omni. And there was one that he had just as they're setting up for Dragon, where he just managed to scoot past, get the charm to Patrick that sets up the kill. Like, some of these were absolutely immaculate. And it was a hero performance from Frescowie to get them. So I do feel a bit bad for Giant X because it felt like nearly they were able to get across the finish line, but they just couldn't quite do it. And then Super just came online in that third game with the Sivir, and you're like, well, you can't match it.
Yeah, and the man who I feel the worst for is honestly just their bot lane. I feel like Patrick and Ignar are playing so well for the most part, and I think that Patrick. Again, I get really tired of talking about how great I think Patrick is because obviously for the average fan, you just never see the results materialize, even if you can see him have good moments. And in a hypercarry meta, like you see a lot of players have good moments, but Patrick is doing really well. Like Patrick is playing really well in so many of these games. In the vast majority of these circumstances, I think game 2, it's like he has almost zero protection compositionally. There's a Nautilus on the enemy side. He's playing Jinx. He gets caught in the final moments, and it's not, it's whatever. You're already kind of lost the game at that point. MDK just continued to just punch, and they really did not give GX room to breathe. But even in game 3, right, like they're getting some early advantage. It feels like there is some hope, and then MDK slow the game down enough. And then, frankly, right, there's a lot of people on MDK who are doing really well, and the inverse of that is like Peach is lost sometimes. And again, Odo Omni talked about last year was a big struggle, communication issues. Now you've got Trick, Ignar, and Odo Omni talked about on the podcast, like his English has gotten better, a lot of things are getting a lot better, but still, when it matters, when they don't have Rel Rakan, because Rel Rakan, again, is the one time that I feel like Ignar and Peach are always playing the same game. This guy is on his own universe, whether it's getting picked early game, whether it's the absolutely abysmal engage into the Braum composition that we saw in game 3 that was just so questionable. And to be fair, right, like Frescowi had a great Ari game, but also GX have like such terrible tools against Frescowi. Anything less than like full confidence Q flash ult onto the Ari, this like Walshy's mid dash animation, you're not going to catch Frescowi this game. And they did not have that confidence. They did not have that level of execution. And sadly, whereas there is a lot of team mistakes that led to that moment, right? And for SK, like a lot of people across the board are making mistakes. Peach to me is the guy that I think just had a really rough weekend and has had a rough split. And it really showed up in the series, which is pretty tragic way to end.
It's either it's a lack of trust or a lack of communication. And I don't know which one it is, but it's specifically when he goes for the Q on Sejuani into the flash to get onto Supa. And you can see that Jackie's is at least standing behind him. And I'm assuming the thought process is, hey, I can CC Sivir long enough for Jackie's to shuffle in, get the knockback. We have the follow-up from Ignar. We can make the play happen. We kill Supa. And then Frescowi isn't, yes, you got Mirren still on TF, but realistically, these two, the Ari, aren't as big of a threat. You can take the team fight from that position. But it didn't look like Jackie's even knew that was a possibility. Jackie's was just kind of standing there. And even if they had, Alvaro was immediately going to be beside him to block that up. So it just felt like, a weird decision. Unless you were so in sync at the moment. And there are very, very few players and teams that I would trust to make that decision and that play in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it requires a layer of trust and immediacy. Like being on, it feels like you nearly need to have that telepathic communication to be like, this is the way that this is going to go. You immediately understand what each other are going for. But it's clear Jackie's and Peach had no idea. And that's just where it made it easy then for the follow-up. And I think that was consistently what we saw was Giant X getting ahead of themselves and trying to set up for an objective or to threaten onto MDK, and just the communication as to who was supposed to be doing what wasn't there. And as you say about the Ari, no real lockup for it, which meant that when they finally got into that last fight where Odo goes over the wall to try and get onto Frescowi because he's like, oh, I can finally kill the Ari. I can finally get rid of this nuisance. And then he doesn't quite get the kill and he turns around and the entire team has died under terror.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, game's done. We didn't get the flick back onto Supa because he's got the spell shield. We didn't manage to catch Mirren either. The entire play is just gone and fizzled out.
Yeah, and credit to MDK, they played so many of these skirmishes and fights really well. I think Frescowi, this is the League of Legends analytical buzzword of the season, is creating space. But he created a lot of space, right? Like even in the flank around mid lane where he just shows up on the side and everyone instantly has to pay attention to him. Yeah. At that moment, he whiffs like every ability, but it doesn't matter because he pulls everyone away from the Sivir and the Braum. He gives them enough room to start auto-attacking, and then clutch spell shield from Supa, as you highlighted, stops the Azir pushback, and the fight is over. And at that moment, you just aren't gonna win the game against the Braum Sivir. We saw it in every fight. Like Patrick's positioning is great. You know, he's out of range of the Sivir. His teammates aren't. And let me tell you about Ricochet.
So much damage.
Our Lord and Savior Ricochet. As long as Supa is hitting somebody, he's hitting Patrick. And if Patrick ever splits away from his team, he has an Ahri to deal with. So this is kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situation. It's brutal.
That's why I want to, on a more positive note, give the credit to Frescowi because back in, maybe it was even winter, I remember there was this Gragas game where he had those great flanks, and I cannot for the life of me remember that game that was. I was a little bit, Frescowi, good on you. Wasn't great vision control set up from the enemy. I think it was against Fnatic, I want to say. I was like,
I remember him being the reason that they won that game. Yeah. He found so many creative paths to hide in vision.
But there was so many times where there just wasn't vision. When I look back at the game, I was like, this is really, really cool. You did a phenomenal job. But I was kind of like, against good teams, this isn't going to work. They're going to have the vision control to spot you out as they went for it. But honestly, he's done it so consistently where he's managed to play around the vision that I have to give him the credit. Frescowi has massively, massively impressed me. And as someone that I wasn't particularly hyped on him coming in, he's blown me out of the water with how well he's been playing and how consistently he's able to create space and find angles to attack that pushes back teams and makes them have to respect him in so many different ways. And if you don't, he's gonna win you the game. And he won the game so often in this series off of these charms that it's just I'm blown away with him. He was so impressive.
It was a really, really good series from Frescowi. I got to give him that credit. And I think that in winter it was a bit of a quieter split for him because the rest of his teammates showed more and he was often on like a bit more of a reserve position compositionally. But I think that he has had a much better time at the very least in this series. And I want to see if we see this trend emerge more where kind of mid laners are given more access to their comfort picks and we just see a more standard banning away of the premier control mage options. I don't know if he's going to get as many opportunities for, a clear Ahri angle in the series to come, but I do hope that we get to see more of him on champions that he really likes to play. So far, I think the Ahri and the Gragas last season, mostly that single game. And now Ahri in this series both looked amazing. And I really like, and I think Jackie showed it too in game one on the Silas. It's like a lot of these rookie guys just look unleashed on their comfort picks in a way that they up till now have only looked on Nico, which isn't saying a lot, right? Nico's a pretty straightforward champion. Although again, credit to Frescowi, he's found some good Nico moments too. He's among the pack of Nico rookies that I think have done well. And so for MDK, I think some optimism for me as they move forward in this one. Team Heretics, I'm still wary about as the two teams kind of coming in from the lower side of the bracket. We'll just kind of have to see how it shapes up for both these lineups. Hearts out again to GX and SK. It's a long break till the next season. I hope they can recover. I hope they can feel good. But now we can talk about some of the teams that are left on the upper side of the bracket. G2 BDS are first best of 5. But before that, Fnatic versus Team Heretics, Vitality versus MDK. I believe Fnatic Team Heretics is easy clear for Fnatic right now.
Yeah.
I think Fnatic series versus G2 was rough. I think G2 played well, don't get me wrong, but I also think Fnatic are a team where if they lose a series in embarrassing fashion, they come back swinging. I expect them to kind of smash Team Heretics because, again, while Team Heretics had some good moments, and Spyro was a great Azir, now you're playing against the king of Azir, the emperor of Azir, and it's like, don't think that's going to work as well this time around, my guy. I do not think that you demolishing an SK who looked a little lost, a little struggling on the day, gives you the edge over Fnatic in this best of 3.
I think it's also Heretics have, in my mind, the bottom 2 in mid-jungle duos in the league, just with how well they work together.
Oh, okay. Just in terms of synergy, not in terms of
individual performance, but as a unit. And you're going up against, in my eyes, probably the ones that, if not the best, one of the top 2 in the remaining playoffs in their league. And it's just, I don't know how you try and compete with them. Humanoid and Razork have been absolutely insane. Even if you try to bring Trimby in, Jun has been great in trying to solidify that trio around the mid lane. So I just don't see an angle where Heretics get control in an early game, especially if playing as slow as they are. And Fnatic have been so good at getting these leads. And Fnatic are one of the teams, when I talk about Heretics saying, hey, you can play late game scaling, but still be aggressive in the early stage and find these advantages. Fnatic are a team that are more than capable of that, and we've seen it several times where they will have an Azir or something along these lines, but they'll play for a shuffle. They'll play for an advantage. They'll get Jun out of lane to work with Razork, to get vision, to find picks, whatever it might be. So a lot of where I see the weaknesses for Heretics are exactly where Fnatic's strengths lie up. And even if you start to get in towards a later portion of the game, Heretics try to go for these quick plays where they'll very quickly overload you or try and take over a lane against you or find a pick. Fnatic already like to do that style. And the 2 picks that we have are, well, 1, the Humanoid's Azir, or 2, the Talia, are just as good at finding those opportunities as well and playing inside lanes. So I just don't find the window of opportunity for Heretics.
And there are so many, every mid laner in our league right now is working on their counter pick options into Azir. So I do think there's a bit of a somewhat hidden mid lane arms race going on behind the scenes right now, just because we didn't have a lot of games where people weren't just going to handshake Azir for some kind of control mage. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of an evolution in that in this series, especially because Humanoid, again, if you just give him Azir and you cooked up some counterpick for Team Heretics, there's always maybe an angle that they can come out on top. But if Fnatic can feel pretty confident to know Team Heretics will pick it, I trust the Humanoid cooking, and frankly, as long as Humanoid and Razork alongside Jun are set up to work together as a trio across the map, Fnatic are just, for me, super, super favored. Team Heretics do have some momentum. If they have a good week of scrims, if they show up in the way that they did in so many games in the regular season, I think this can be closer. I still favor Fnatic. It could be closer. But the way this week started for Team Heretics makes me so nervous because I don't know what happened between regular season and that series versus BDS, but they looked so lost, right? And there was no stage game that would indicate that they would look as bad as they did. So I just don't have a ton of faith for Team Heretics to come in firing on all cylinders. And I do have that faith in Fnatic because I have so much faith, and especially those 3 players, Razork, Humanoid, and Jun. I think Noah and Oscar are still very hit or miss depending on the day, but I just don't think that in the greater context of this matchup that matters a whole lot.
Yeah, this to me is a 90-10 matchup for Fnatic. I give Heretics, it seems nearly impossible coming into this for me, for Heretics to try and win. And that's also because I think Fnatic are one of the teams that I expect to be in finals. Fnatic are
I agree.
One of the teams, even though they lost 2-0 to G2 and it's pretty...
I'm not telling you they're going to beat G2 in the finals, but
they are, I think, clearly top 2 in our league. And Heretics just haven't shown me anything in playoffs that convinces me. Maybe if this was the regular season Heretics, I'd be like, okay, cool. You know, they found some early windows of opportunity to get Trimby out of lane and that, but they just don't look like they're comfortable doing it. If we look at, the last couple of games, it's been a bunch of...
range supports. It's not been about leaving lanes.
But also when we looked at them coming in towards the regular season end, they're playing things like Zeri and that, but it was, hey, we can get Trimby out with the Rakan into playing around the mid lane and working with Giancos, trying to play this style. But when you look back at the last few games and with the games they've won, it's been like Milio and things that are stuck in that bottom side of the map. And it just feels like their early game has struggled as a result. So unless they can change up their draft where they can get Trimby back out on the map, that I think they'll look good. But if I'm Fnatic, it's probably just a ban Rakan. And after that, there's not really any champion that I'm worried about giving Heretics.
The blueprint is there in a really big way. If you look at the BDS series, they get Nautilus in both games and it puts Trimby on Alistar. He has a miserable series. And in the SK game, clearly they think that is a point of weakness that can be exploited because they ban Nautilus in every single game. Mm-hmm. And while Team Heretics ultimately are the victor there, it does shut down so much of what Trimby has been successful at doing, which is the playmaking. And I think that as he goes deeper into his champion pool, he's just not having that same reliable impact that the team clearly needs and clearly leveraged very heavily in the regular season. Now, there's a lot of Nautilus players in the league. It's a very common pick. Trimby did look great on the Milio, but the situations in which a lot of those more niche picks are relevant are pretty limited. And so to me, it's like Fnatic has gotten to see exactly how you beat this team. The only saving grace might be that Fnatic are, looking past you to upcoming challenges, but that's disrespectful. I'm not going to assume that they're doing that. And, Fnatic are a team that I think are comfortable to probably give you a Nautilus, maybe ban it away to take things like a Tom Kench to just say, hey, we'll match you in scaling and outplay you on the map, outplay you in the fights. So, yeah, 90-10 is ruthless, but I'm inclined to agree, right? Like, I think this is so hard for Team Heretics. Again, they've already done better than they did in the previous season. Last season, they finished 7th, 8th. Now they're top 6. They want more. It's, again, every single team and every single interview. Shout out to Sheep Esports, reading a lot of interviews over there. Sadly, every single team says the exact same thing, which is that they want to, unsurprisingly, go to China, go to MSI, contest G2, more or less. But yeah, if that's your ambition, you got a week. You need your Rocky Balboa montage, because based on what we've seen on stage, this is, Fnatic clears pretty easily. The other series, though, damn if I know, bro. What the hell? Vitality versus MDK. All I can tell you for sure is that this series is going to slap. This is going to be a super entertaining series, but these are, again, MDK are slowly getting back to that form. I think slowly finding their footing. But again, they didn't play a super, super convincing series against GX. They were the better team, but it was much closer than the Team Heretics SK series. And Vitality should be better. Should 100% win. And yet they have some of glaring weaknesses that are so nice for MDK stylistically as a team, where they will fight Vitality early game, where they're, a little fast, a little loose. And then even if Vitality get a lead, we've seen they are a little fast, a little loose. Yeah. And it's like MDK are a team who will fight you if they're, and I think if MDK get back to their roots, maybe in drafting some more aggressive options and some more comfort picks, there's a really real world where we can start to see MDK try to replicate the success that they had in winter. Vitality, again, should be the favorites by all accounts. I think Carzzy, Hilly, when they're playing well, incredible bot lane. Carzzy, you already called him the best AD in the league, which I think it's not a stretch. I think he's in the running. A lot of people aren't convinced about Carzzy because he has some questionable games, but you watch that Xayah game, you can start to believe. And I don't know. MDK are not flawless. Frescowi had a great series, but
Yeah.
Mirwin still looks exploitable. I think it's an indication of where the team's head is at when like they give him R5 counter pick and he picks a vanilla ice cream matchup. Lore said the most savage thing I've ever heard her say when he picked Gnar into Ottawamne's Renekton. She's like, this pick lacks ambition. I was like, damn. It's just like Elden Ring flashbacks. Lay these foolish ambitions to rest. You know, like, damn. Had a good game. Like, admittedly, he had a good game. But, like, yeah, I think that a lot of the flair that Mirwin had and a lot of the things that kind of put him above a lot of the top laners, and especially a top laner like Photon, who has been a brick house, so reliable for this team, just unstoppable. I don't think you're winning the normal matchup. You're not winning the 50-50 conventional. If you're not about to pick something weird, I just don't see this favoring you.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I said this on camera, but I've definitely said it behind the scenes. This split has felt like Photon got angry that no one talked about him being the best top laner, and then is just demolishing everyone. This guy's had an incredible split, roasting Adam on the Rumble into the Olaf matchup, having great games on the Jace. This guy has been a beast, and I think he has been the one consistent part where I looked at Vitality and gone, fantastic. You can always kind of expect to have a good performance from Photon at the moment until he picks Akshan. But that's where I think it's great.
Yeah.
The problem is with the rest of the match. I do agree where I think Mirwin has to bring out something funky against them, because even the Renekton into the Gnar, Mirwin kind of got his ass handed to him by Odo in a lot of situations. Yes, he did get the solo kill back, but there was a lot of mistakes that were coming through in that matchup.
A lot of small hiccups. Did almost play perfectly enough to get the solo kill. Had that one really positive trade, then got a little over keen and just...
Yeah, but even then it was, the CS advantage was already opening up for Odo in that matchup. You could already see that he's playing it very well, and getting the shove consistently as the Renekton is kind of crazy. So it just felt like you didn't fully get how to play it. And if you go up against Photon, who's willing to bring out a carry top laner and punish you even heavier with that, I feel like that is definitely a weakness. But I just don't trust Vitality to try and bring a game forward into a strong mid game, because we've seen them be very inconsistent. Their control and vision control at objectives isn't there. And MTK are a team that you already highlighted don't go down without a fight.
Yeah.
So if they're willing to continuously fight you at these objectives, look for picks, look for plays with Oyoy and Alvaro, that's going to be where they try and punish you. And they are very quick at turning out a fight. If they think they have it, even if it's not 100%, if it's like a 40% chance,
Super
they're
will
like,
come over a wall and act as a catalyst for Alvaro to go in and look a little foolish, but kind of somehow salvage the fight until Patrick kills him and gets a triple. Yeah, like they'll fight you.
Exactly. And I think that's actually what Vitality struggle against. So I don't know. This to me just feels like a coin flip.
Yeah.
I wish I had more analysis to give you on this, but it just feels like whoever kind of shows up on the day could do great. And if MDK manage to get a strong early game, they can definitely take it home against Vitality. Yeah. But I could easily see them throwing as well and Vitality bring it back, or Vitality have Hilly-san control the early game and MDK don't get rolling and Vitality close it. It's so hard to tell you.
Yeah, and I think it's always unfair to evaluate matchups in the context of pure 1v1 matchups. I think it's an easy way to look at things, and it's something we like to do a lot, but you have to remember the league is always going to be a team game. It's never played in isolation. Top lane maybe the one exception, but like, to oversimplify here, it's like mid lane I think is pretty close. Like I give the edge in more conventional matchup to VTO certainly, but I think the Syndra looked terrible. I hope that like his Jace game was obviously great. You know, he got 5 kills. Oh, he looks super fed. He looks super good this weekend. But I'm not like, I don't super feel like that swings one way. Jungle matchup should very heavily favor El Yo-Yo, but in the same vein, top lane should very heavily favor. So it's like bot lane's close. Top side feels like where it's the most volatile, but a lot also depends on what these teams want to pick.
This support matchup is going to be sick. That's actually the most exciting.
I have never wanted both players to be able to play Rakan, but this is a matchup that makes me miss, game 5 blind pick. Not that I was even casting then. I don't know why I'm saying I miss it. Like
this is going to say, I actually want to see a Rakan Braum matchup because I feel like there's going to be so many. I know that sounds weird. When you think about the team fights, when you get in there, Hilly's going in, Alvaro's trying to cover one side, then you're going to have him trying to jump in to get the CC needs, and then Hilly's trying to fly back in. It feels like the amount of maybe it's just because I'm a support, but the amount of decision making and within those microseconds that are going to completely change the outcome of a fight are going to be so sick to see. And even just the mind games leading up to it of what angle of attack does Hilly come in for? How does he try and skirt vision? How does he try and outplay Alvaro in this moment? It's going to be so sick.
Yeah. I don't want that because I feel like that's like, it's like the...
just trust for the team fights.
It's like the mountain versus the viper. Really old Game of Thrones reference since we talked about Game of Thrones earlier, where he's like, aha, dancing around, aha, and then Braum. But like the problem is that like most of the time Rakan, you know, just has more and better tools. It's just like Braum has the single most broken ability in the game on his E and a really good passive. And it's like, is that enough to outvalue a Rakan who can, in theory, lock everyone up on your team for such a long amount of time and is impossible to kill? I don't know, Rob. But the bot lane matchup is for sure fire. Like, that's what I want. If I could just watch one matchup, that would be the matchup I watch the entire series. Yeah. Assuming they pick something interesting. I imagine we will end up in a situation where it's just, you pick a scaling AD, I pick a scaling AD, and then the supports maybe hopefully get to lead the lane.
Zeri's going to be real high priority for this.
Yeah, but Carzzy played Ezreal. Ezreal looked good. Like, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Vitality from individual moments, but overall, it's still super questionable. And when you look at the overall team play, that's what we have to base a lot of our predictions on. And still a little bit suspect from old mate Vitality, even if they did have a pretty good weekend. Transitioning away, though, Photon, while he did get the best of Adam in that one Rumble match from the regular season, Adam on the Gragas, game 2, gets that kill back. People were upset about his itemization choices. Why no Roa early? Minnie said. The Seraphs instead. But then he solo killed. And I'm not going to say it's because of the Seraph, but he got that, so we got to give him credit for it. And now he has to go toe-to-toe against Broken Blade. And this matchup, to the surprise of no one, we're probably going to favor G2, unless you have a bold prediction here, Rob. No.
I genuinely think G2 is BDS's kryptonite. BDS are trying to get better at side lanes. They're trying to get better at the mid-game. But they still, every single time, will go back to, we will rely on our objective setup and our objective fights, and G2 don't care.
And frankly... they should have lost game 3. Nuke died, Nuke walks away from that game with a pentakill. He died 5 million times on the side lane. And against a lot of other teams, that would have been enough to end the game. Vitality couldn't really push further. They had scaling on their side. This game looked over. This looked like 2-1 back and forth series, close, contentious. And credit to BDS, they held on. They played the fights well. They found good angles. You know, they kept themselves alive in this game. But my God, Vitality should have won that game. Vitality had all the tools necessary to win that game. Nuke was so far behind, put in the dumpster, dying on side lanes. He came back in a big way, and he deserves credit for that. But, you cannot die like that on a side lane against G2. And you are going to be against Caps in the stupid mid lane arms race against Azir. You're going to be in that situation.
Or there's going to be a way on G2 side, or there's going to be some other crazy, or the Aurelian Soul. You know, there's going to be something
really good. I feel like people are sleeping on Aurelian Soul right now. I understand.
Yeah, he's really strong.
I think he's just so good.
I mean, we even got to see him now in the LPL as well. Teams are picking him up. But I agree, for all of the above, there's very little mistakes that you can make against G2 that won't go unpunished. And I just don't know how you try and try. We will probably see Nuke go back towards Azir. G2 are going to be happy to take that handshake because, look, we are looked at Caps' solo queue.
He's playing. If you ever want just LOL pros or whatever, just check pro player solo queue before you watch a series. It almost always gives you the spicy picks that they might pull out. Yeah. They're not always going to come true because the circumstances aren't going to line up, but see what's coming.
But that's the thing is, even if
they are, usually they'll save it until it's like a do or die moment.
But it's also a case of you have to get some practice on it in solo queue. And if you get smacked about by a Rumble support several times in a row also, in solo queue,
shout out to
chances are I should maybe look into this.
Yeah, also shout out to the people who are because shout out to how do I phrase these? The research enthusiasts that track things like, this random solo queue account started with, Plat 1 MMR or whatever, and is only playing games from 10 p.m. to midnight. Wow, convenient. That's after scrims. Who is this? Which pro player is this? Because I have so many people in the past who have just sent me accounts to be like, I'm pretty sure this is Caps' Smurf. So it's like, you have to understand how hard it is to have a hidden account. Unless you are leveling it to 30 yourself, grinding it up, right? Or account sharing, which is bad. We don't do that. None of that. None of that. You'd hope that they weren't breaking the rules to get their secret account. It is nigh impossible to have a secret account in this day and age.
But that's it. Again, I think it's just people are aware of so many of the picks as well. And if it ends up popping up in solo queue and doing really well, people start to look into it.
It has to be really, really niche. But yeah, so overall, BDS, I do want to give credit where credit is due. While Nuke, I think, had struggled a little bit in that last game, did get caught a lot, which is a thing I'm going to flag for the series to come. I think Lebrov had a much better series overall, which was big for him because, again, in the previous weeks, I was really not. I thought Lebrov was struggling. But across the series this weekend, I think that he did a really good job, and I want to give him that credit there, and I hope that he can keep that level of performance up. He's going to need to against G2. And overall, I think BDS, while some parts of their results feel not as satisfying, I think, for them as they should, because Team Heretics looked super lost on day one, the first opponent that they played. And then in the third game, they got away with murder against Vitality, I'll be honest. I still think BDS deserved the credit overall. But it sadly was not enough. It did not inspire enough confidence in me for them to give them a fighting chance against G2. It's not a 90-10, though, I will say. I think it's like a 70-30, 80-20.
80-20, yeah. I genuinely just think BDS will forever struggle against G2 until they understand how to play sidelines.
Yeah.
And it is clearly something that BDS are working on, and you can see the improvements even over the course of this series. I think we called that out in the cast, saying you can see the character growth from BDS where they are able to play through side lanes. I just don't think they're at a level yet where they can beat G2, but I definitely think they are getting to that point. And over the course of this year, I think we will continue to see that growth. And I'm actually genuinely excited because I think that will lead to BDS undeniably being one of our top teams once they solve that issue. And I'm really, really excited because it's so cool to see how hard they are working on that.
Yeah, I respect it. Got a lot of respect for BDS. G2, though, still feel definitely not infallible, but or unbeatable, but still feels like a bit too tall of a task for the vast majority of our teams. Obviously, we said this in cast yesterday too. Showing up on the day is just so big. There's so much of these games that feels like it should just be about macro that ends up being about individual performances and individual players really stepping up, which I think is a great spot to be, frankly. Concerning for international, but really cool to see because it gives the opportunity for players to really make their mark on a series, individuals.
I would just rather it was the marriage of both.
Yeah, give me whatever is going to beat North America and give us a couple best of fives against the LPL and LCK. That's all I want. I'm a simple man. I want simple needs. So Saturday, of course, is Fnatic versus Team Heretics, Vitality versus MDK. Sunday is our first best of 5. That is G2 versus BDS. And then Monday we have the other. This is the bottom of the bracket. We'll see who can kind of make the run up now. We're coming out of the last set of best of 3s and into the best of 5 portions. And then obviously the weekend after that is finals weekend. Only 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, for the victor of G2 versus BDS versus whoever is going to make that bottom run. A lot sits in front of us. G2 Fnatic finals, Rob, you predicting it?
Yeah, that's fully what I believe. I think Fnatic are clearly in the top 2, and it feels like G2 is always inevitable. So
I feel like Fnatic, Vitality, or BDS are all. Sorry, MDK fans. Sorry, Team Heretics fans. Those are I could see any of them in the finals, depending on how these next games shake up. But I agree. I think Fnatic are the safest bet, the most reliable bet of the remaining teams.
I also think it's the best form Fnatic has looked. I think this is the best chance for Fnatic to overtake G2 in a final. I still favor G2 in that one, but G2 have not looked good. If you look at their most recent series,
that's true.
I'm not saying Fnatic are favored, but I think it is. If there was ever a time for Fnatic to overcome G2 again and take the title, it's this split.
Hell yeah, and that's the one way you can guarantee MSI. MSI race obviously for points. You need to take a look at the points if you want to understand what's going on. For Team Heretics, if they want to get it, I think they essentially just have to win.
Yeah.
Because if G2 win, it's then based on who has the most points, and Team Heretics are obviously, from finishing 7th, 8th in the previous split, wildly far behind the other teams. So we'll keep you up to date. You can check that out on the broadcast. We'll be coming your way this Saturday, again, 5 p.m. as always, Berlin time. Is it summertime? Is it not? I don't know. Time zones are hard. Whatever time it is in Berlin, 5 p.m. Central European summertime. So check that out. This has been EUphoria. I'm Drakos. That's Rob. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week before the finals. Brace yourselves.